Have you ever walked into a room and felt your entire being shift before you even said a word? As if some invisible thread pulled your shoulders back, softened your voice, and adjusted your smile? Not because it felt right, but because you thought that's what would make others feel more comfortable. Maybe you've said yes while your chest tightened with dread, or laughed at a joke that made your skin crawl, or offered help when your soul was already on its knees. And if you're honest, you've probably done it more times than you can count. Not because you're weak or unaware, but because somewhere along the line, you learned that your safety was tied to being accepted, that being liked meant being good, that if you kept everyone else happy, maybe, just maybe, you'd be okay too. It doesn't happen all at once, this quiet unraveling. It starts in small moments, when you swallow your truth instead of speaking it, when you smile instead of cry, when you nod instead of say no. At first, it even feels noble, mature, generous. You're the peacemaker, the dependable one, the one who just knows what others need. You pride yourself on it. But little by little, the cost starts to show, not outside, but deep within. It shows up in the fatigue that no sleep can touch, the vague resentment that bubbles up in traffic or when the phone rings, the sadness that wraps around your chest at night and whispers, "Is this really all there is?" Carl Jung once described the persona as the mask we wear to face society. A necessary costume, he said, that helps us survive, adapt, belong. It's not evil, this mask. It's part of being human. But there's a catch. When the mask stops being something you wear and starts becoming who you think you are, that's when the fracture begins. It's subtle at first. You begin to confuse your role with your soul. You start editing your desires before they even form. You forget how to feel anger. You apologize for taking up space. You begin to disappear from your own life. And the world? The world claps. It rewards your compliance. It praises your politeness, your helpfulness, your ability to not need too much. You become the kind of person people lean on, but never really look at. The kind of person others love being around, but rarely ask, "How are you really?" Because you've trained them not to. Because somewhere along the way, you trained yourself not to ask either. There's a moment, and maybe you felt it, when you're standing in the middle of your life, surrounded by people, doing all the right things, and yet you feel completely alone. You wonder why you're so exhausted when nothing's technically wrong. You question why you feel numb even when you're smiling. This is the soul's quiet protest. This is the part of you that still remembers who you were before you started performing for acceptance. We learn early. To survive, we learn. We pick up cues like radar. What makes mom smile? What makes dad stay? What keeps teachers proud? What avoids punishment? What gets us loved, or at least less neglected? And so we begin shaping ourselves like clay, molding our voices, our moods, our opinions into something digestible. We become convenient, predictable, easy to like, and without even noticing, we stop being ourselves. We become a version of who others seem to prefer. And with each small denial of truth, we step further away from our center, not in rebellion, but in fear. The fear of being abandoned, rejected, misunderstood. The fear of being too much or not enough. Jung didn't speak of healing as becoming someone new. He spoke of it as a return, a remembering, a recollection of the scattered pieces we've hidden or disowned. The mask is not the enemy. It's the forgetting that there was ever a face underneath. You see, authenticity doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It just aches quietly when it's ignored. And when you live too long from the outside in, from duty, from obligation, from others' expectations, you begin to live a life that looks good but feels hollow. A life of performance, of mimicry, of quiet panic behind every yes. We call this the high-functioning sadness. You wake up, you get things done, you smile, but the spark is gone. The joy feels artificial. And sometimes, when you're finally alone, you collapse, not just from tiredness, but from the weight of everything you never said, everything you never allowed yourself to feel. There is a strange kind of grief in realizing that you've become a stranger to your own inner world, that you can describe what everyone else wants from you, but not what you want for yourself. That when someone asks, "What do you need?" you genuinely don't know how to answer. Because for so long, your needs were tucked behind everyone else's. And the tragedy is, the longer you live like this, the more natural it feels. Until one day you wake up and wonder why nothing feels real anymore. This is not a crisis. This is a calling. The ache is your soul's whisper. The fatigue is not weakness, it's a message, a sign that the mask is suffocating, that the role you've been playing has run its course, that the script you've been handed no longer fits the shape of your truth. And maybe you're scared. Maybe the idea of shedding this mask feels terrifying, because it's not just a mask anymore. It's a structure. It's your job, your relationships, your reputation, your safety. But you weren't born to be a structure. You were born to be a soul. Sometimes I wonder how many people are out there living lives that were never meant for them, staying in roles that feel more like cages than choices, smiling when they want to scream, saying yes when their whole body says no, not out of malice, but out of a deep fear of what might happen if they stopped, if they just stopped. But here's the quiet truth. Stopping doesn't mean breaking. It means returning. It means remembering what you knew before the world taught you to perform. It means trusting that your truth, however inconvenient, has a right to exist. That you are not here to decorate other people's stories while neglecting your own. And yes, there will be consequences. People might notice the change. Some will resist it. Some might fall away. But the ones who stay, they will meet the real you. And the peace that comes from that kind of honesty is worth every awkward conversation, every shaky boundary, every no that trembles on your lips before it finds its strength. What Jung knew, and what most of us forget, is that wholeness is not about perfection. It's about integration. It's about holding both the parts of you that want to belong and the parts that long to be free. It's about recognizing that your need to be loved is not wrong, but that love, when it's real, doesn't require the death of your truth. So, if you feel tired, not just physically, but existentially, if you feel like you're drifting or disappearing or aching for something you can't quite name, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just done pretending. Maybe your soul is ready to come home.
Somewhere along the way, your body started speaking louder than your mouth ever could. It wasn't sudden. It never is. Maybe it started with sleepless nights, even though you were exhausted. Or with sudden bursts of sadness at the grocery store, tears welling up in the middle of nothing. You told yourself it was just stress, a phase, the weather. But your soul knew better. The body is honest in ways words can't be. And when you've ignored your truth long enough, it begins to knock from the inside. There's a war happening beneath the surface, a quiet war. On one side is the ego, that part of you that wants to keep things running smoothly. It wants approval, stability, control. It wants to make sure you stay liked, stay safe, stay predictable. It's the part of you that says, just say yes, keep the peace, even when your insides twist with resistance. On the other side is the unconscious. That deep, wild, ancient part of you that does not negotiate. It doesn't care about your to-do list. It doesn't care how polished your image is. It only wants one thing: truth. And when the ego keeps pushing your truth into the dark, day after day, year after year, the unconscious begins to rebel. But it doesn't speak in clean sentences. It whispers in symptoms, symbols, and strange compulsions. You feel anxious, but there's no clear reason. You get irritable over small things. Your chest tightens when the phone rings. You walk into a room and forget why you came. These aren't flaws. They're signals. They're your psyche waving a red flag, saying, something's not right. You're not where you belong. Jung understood this. He knew that when the ego strays too far from the center, when we start living entirely for appearances, for approval, the unconscious begins to compensate. Not out of malice, but out of balance. Like an inner scale tipping too far one way, the soul pushes back. And the further you push the persona, the mask, the more the shadow leaks in. Not the villainous shadow that stories warn us about, but the part of you you've silenced. The anger, the longing, the boundaries you didn't draw, the voice you never used. That's the shadow. And when it's buried too long, it doesn't go away. It just changes shape. It slips into your relationships. You find yourself snapping at the people you love or retreating from them entirely. It slips into your choices: overeating, overworking, overscrolling, over everything. You keep yourself busy because stillness feels too dangerous, because in the silence, something old starts to stir. And you're not sure what it is, but you know it has teeth. The worst part? On the outside, you seem fine. You function. You smile. You meet deadlines. You check every box. But inside, you feel like you're disappearing. Like you're performing a life rather than living one. You're praised for being calm, for being reliable, for never making a fuss. But no one knows that you're crumbling in quiet ways, that you've forgotten what it feels like to be truly known. And the grief that comes with that forgetting, it doesn't show up with fanfare. It arrives in small, devastating waves. You forget what excites you. You struggle to make decisions because you no longer trust your own wants. You second-guess your gut. You apologize before you've even made a mistake. And somewhere deep down, you wonder if maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're just too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy. But you're not. You're just exhausted from carrying a life that doesn't feel like yours. There is nothing wrong with being kind, with caring, with wanting connection. But when your self-worth becomes fused with being needed, being useful, being agreeable, you begin to vanish. You become a ghost in your own body, smiling on cue, nodding on time, living for reflections in other people's eyes. There are some of us more prone to this than others. Jung described certain psychological types, particularly those led by extroverted feeling, as especially vulnerable. These are the ones who walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional temperature, who adapt their tone, their words, even their posture to avoid conflict, who feel the most alive when others are pleased and the most ashamed when they're not. These people are intuitive peacekeepers, but they often don't realize that peacekeeping, when unchecked, turns into self-erasure. They confuse being loved with being accommodating, being seen with being needed. And over time, the boundary between who they are and who they expect them to be completely dissolves. If this feels familiar, know that you are not alone. You are not broken. You are just running on a system that was built to survive, not to thrive. You were shaped by environments where approval equaled safety, and so you adapted brilliantly. But survival patterns aren't meant to be permanent homes. They're meant to get you through, not define who you are. And when your nervous system lives in constant anticipation of rejection, when you brace yourself before every interaction, when your yeses come faster than your truth can keep up, it's not because you lack strength. It's because you learned, often early, that being yourself was risky, that your emotions were too loud, your needs too much, your anger unacceptable. So you tucked those parts away, buried them, and called it maturity. But the soul keeps the score, and eventually what you bury starts to surface. In your dreams, in your fatigue, in your longing for something you can't name. Maybe you've had those dreams, the ones where you're running but can't move, where you're shouting but no sound comes out, where you're lost in a place that once felt familiar. These aren't just dreams. They're your unconscious breaking through, telling the truth you've been too tired or too scared to say aloud. And so your body joins in. Panic attacks that come out of nowhere. A stomach that knots itself at the smallest request. Insomnia that no routine can fix. Your body too is begging for truth, because your body is not separate from your soul. It remembers what you've forgotten. It holds what your mind refuses to feel. And so you find yourself here, in this strange space between knowing and not knowing, between wanting to let go of the mask and being terrified of what that might mean. I won't lie, this space is uncomfortable. It's messy. It's full of grief and confusion and doubt, but it is also sacred because it means something in you is still alive, still willing to fight for your real self, still whispering, "This isn't it. There's more." You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to rip off the mask in one dramatic gesture. All you need is to pause, to breathe, to notice, to ask, what have I been pretending not to feel? What part of me is aching to be seen? What would it mean to live just a little closer to my truth? These questions don't demand immediate answers. They are openings, invitations. And once asked, they begin to shift everything. Slowly, subtly, but irreversibly. Because once the truth has been stirred awake, it doesn't go back to sleep.
By now, something inside you may feel tender, not broken, just raw, as if a layer of yourself that had gone quiet is finally breathing again. That's how it begins, not with some grand transformation, but with a subtle shift. The moment you stop running from yourself and sit with what is, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. Because beneath all the noise and perfection and pretending, there's a quiet question waiting for you. Who am I when I stop trying to be what they need? It's not easy to answer. We've spent so long becoming who the world asked us to be, so long shaping ourselves to avoid conflict, rejection, abandonment. But eventually, the cost of being pleasing becomes too high. Your soul, exhausted from being edited, will refuse to continue. Not because it's dramatic, but because it wants to live. Carl Jung called the process of coming back to the self individuation. Not a spiritual escape, not a quest for specialness, but a deep, slow remembering of who you were before the world told you who to be. It's not about throwing away the mask entirely. It's about loosening your grip on it, about realizing you are not the role, that the persona is just a tool, not your identity. Individuation is inconvenient. It pulls you inward when everyone expects you to keep performing. It asks you to listen to the anger you've silenced, the grief you've pushed down, the boundaries you were never taught to name. It is not gentle at first. It asks you to look at the parts of yourself you've judged, denied, disowned, the shadow you feared would make you unlovable. But here's the beautiful, impossible truth. Those rejected parts are not there to destroy you. They are your missing pieces, the parts that never got to speak, the parts that still carry your vitality, your voice, your will. To meet them is to meet your wholeness. This journey isn't linear. One day, you'll feel free. The next, you'll catch yourself smiling through discomfort again. That's okay. Old patterns die slowly, not because you're failing, but because they were your armor, your way of staying safe in a world that didn't always feel safe to be yourself in. It takes time to unlearn the belief that love must be earned through sacrifice, that your needs are a burden, that your silence is noble. But as you gently peel back those beliefs, something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel the ground beneath your feet again. You start making choices from desire, not fear. You notice when your voice shakes and you use it anyway. You say no without explaining. You say yes without guilt. You stop apologizing for existing in your full complexity. And yes, some people won't understand the change. They may miss the version of you who made everything easy. But the ones who truly love you, they will rise to meet the real you. They will stay, not for the role you played, but for the truth you embody. You may lose things on this path: approval, comfort, predictability. But what you gain is something no applause can offer. You gain yourself, your soul, your inner compass. The quiet joy of knowing that you are no longer abandoning yourself to be accepted. Peace, as it turns out, does not come from being pleasing. It comes from being aligned. When what you think, feel, believe, and choose finally begin to speak the same language, when your life stops being a performance and becomes a reflection of your truth, that's when the fog lifts. That's when the emptiness starts to fill with something real. Not every day will be clear, not every step will be certain, but the direction becomes undeniable. You are walking home to yourself, and every moment you choose presence over performance, truth over politeness, self-respect over people-pleasing, you are reclaiming the pieces you once gave away for love. This is not a message of blame. You adapted because you had to. You survived the only way you knew how. But now that you are awake to it, you are free to choose again, to write a new story, one where you don't have to disappear to belong, one where love doesn't require self-erasure, one where your own inner voice is the one you trust most deeply. There will be quiet revolutions in this new story, the kind that start in grocery store aisles, in early morning mirrors, in awkward silences where you choose not to fill the air with false agreement, the kind that unfold in small acts of truth-telling, to yourself, to others. A whispered no, a trembling yes, a pause where once there was a smile. And maybe the world won't notice. Maybe they'll keep praising the persona. But you will notice. Your body will soften. Your nights will feel a little lighter. Your dreams will become less desperate. Your heart will begin to trust you again. Because freedom isn't loud. Sometimes it's simply this: waking up, looking in the mirror, and seeing someone you no longer have to perform to become. Someone who is enough, not because they meet expectations, but because they exist. You're not here to be agreeable at the cost of your soul. You are not here to be decor to others while neglecting your own. You are here to be whole. So today, even if it's just for a moment, choose yourself. In one small way. Say what you mean. Rest when you're tired. Let the silence speak. Refuse the urge to please at your own expense. These are not selfish acts. They are sacred ones. They are how you begin to remember what it feels like to be real. And when the doubts come, and they will, when the world asks you to shrink again, to soften your voice, to dim your truth, come back here. Remember the quiet rebellion of choosing authenticity, the silent strength of no longer performing, the gentle power of looking in the mirror and saying, I am here and I am staying with myself, no matter who leaves. That sentence alone, that devotion to your own being, is a revolution. Not loud, not fast, but one that changes everything. And maybe that's how healing begins. Not with a grand declaration, but with one quiet, unwavering decision to stop betraying yourself, to begin, even imperfectly, to come home.